All right, so new season, new decks. I finished the Lent challenge I was doing, um, and it wasn't so bad. I was only working with 5 decks for the entirety of Lent, which is 40 days, and it went surprisingly well. It was only maybe like the last like 5 to 7 days where I really started getting a little antsy, I guess. But that's typical. Like when a new season is kind of rolling in, I tend to need to switch up the energy. So it was getting to be that time anyway, so it worked out fine. Um, these are the decks I'm going to be working with this sort of, I guess spring technically already started in March, but for me, it starts to feel like spring around this time of year. Um, and even so, it's still kind of cold, but it looks like spring outside. So the first deck I'm gonna be using, let's do the Oracle decks first. This is one of the more well-known. This is the Wisdom of the Oracle. It's not new. Pretty sure like everybody has it. Well, maybe not everybody, but it's pretty popular. And I just got it. I don't know, I was looking for something a little kind of surrealish. Um, yeah, I have the Surrealist Tarot, but that's a little more like, I don't know, I get like scientific-y like vibes from that sort of surreal. This one's more like artsy surreal, which is funny because the Surrealist Tarot is literally actual artwork, but this one's more gentle, I guess, and the colors are a lot softer. Um, so I'm using this one. I don't know. I guess we'll probably a season for me is probably like about a month and a half or so. Um, or at least the beginning half of one season to the end half of another. It actually is almost literally a month and a half, but that's when I start to feel the difference in the energy. So this will be I'll call it the first half of my spring. So I haven't worked too much with this deck yet, but the first time I did, I mean, it read loud and clear, that's for sure. So I definitely have a lot of blues going on. Um, whereas last season, I don't know, those decks were just heavier. Um, I have a video on it, but they use the Surrealist Tarot, the Black Tarot, um, modern spellcasters, the Angelarium Oracle, and the Urban Tarot. So heavy decks, but they felt appropriate. Now that we're moving into this next phase, it's not really like I don't think I'd be able to carry that heavy energy as well or work with it as well. So actually, you know what? I'll put these across just so you guys can see. Sorry about this shaking camera. It'll stop. Just so you guys can see how the decks kind of look together. And this is a good one. And trying to get different See, the color palette is so cohesive. It's hard to find ones that like represent all areas because they kind of all just go. I guess we'll just put this one here. It's a very artistically cohesive deck. So we have the Wisdom of the Oracle. And then the second Oracle deck is it's called the Begin Oracle. This one I got on Etsy. I'll put the link below. This one I might actually do maybe a full flip through of, just because I don't see it that often on, I guess anyway, on social media. And it's such a good deck. Oh my god, it's probably one of my favorite Oracle decks. And, you know, I always love to support those indie artists out there. This one deserves much more attention than it gets. It's very eclectic. It's a collage deck. But so you have art that kind of falls in this general theme, and then you have like collage. And then there's even like kind of art that looks a little more hand-drawn. Collage. And yet it kind of just goes. Like it's just one of those decks that just kind of like it is what it is. Like it owns itself, and it works really well. So I like to, if I'm using 2 Oracle decks in a given time, or working with 2 Oracle decks, I like to have one that kind of clarifies and one that is more thematic. These both could kind of go either way, but Wisdom of the Oracle is a great clarification deck. And this one has more general themes, obviously depending on how you're phrasing the question you're looking into. But I mean, that's why I say they could both go either way. But they just work, they just balance each other, I feel. This one kind of creeps me out, but I like it. Oh, this one's also creepy. But I, again, love that. I like that it's not just like a, it's not just like a trendy deck, I suppose is the word. So that's the Begin Oracle. I like this one. I actually kind of want to leave this one here. I like that. So that's the second Oracle deck. Oh, actually, I realized there's actually 3 Oracle decks. The third Oracle deck is the Heavenly Bodies Astrology deck, or astrology cards, or something like that. Mass market, got it at Barnes & Noble. I haven't really, I every quote season that I acknowledge a new grouping of cards, I try to use cards that I've gotten in the last year or so that I haven't worked with as much as I would like to. And so I'm not really comfortable with them yet. So I'm throwing in this astrology deck because I've found, and I've only been using these cards for a couple days now, I found that if I'm doing a spread and it's starting to get a little too esoteric or a little too I don't want to say something's ever too spiritual when you're doing like, I don't know, like self-work, but if I'm looking for a more grounded answer, like actual practical ways to incorporate something in the day-to-day, and as opposed to a theoretical thing like, you know, like the Eight of Cups. Well, like, okay, but like what exactly am I walking away from? I like to use these cards because for me, astrology is very much a practical study of how things directly affect your life. So it's been good for that. And I have two astrology decks. Haven't worked with either of them really yet. I guess I was just waiting until I was ready. But this deck has all of the houses, all the planets, all of the signs, and North and South Node. The Cardinal Fixed and Mutable cards are in here, and the elements are in here, and something else I'm missing. It'll come to me. Oh, the conjunction and trine and speaking of the devil, opposition, sextile, different angles that tell you the relationship between planetary bodies. I don't know why I'm blanking on the word for that right now. Positions, I suppose. I don't know. I'm completely having a brain fart right now. Especially when I get a house card. Well, for all of these, again, it's a very grounding deck to use when you're looking for practical applications. But I'd say especially the houses really answers that question of like, oh, well, what am I supposed to do with this though? The nodes are actually, let me see if I can find that. The North Node, my favorite cards, because it's like this kind of like serpent sand dragon type of deal. And I just think the colors are so beautiful. So this is the Heavenly Bodies astrology deck, and make some more space for it. The last two decks are tarot decks. I'm using one deck that I know pretty well, that's always consistent with me, and another deck that I haven't really worked with the way that I was meaning to when I bought it. Oh, you know what? I really like that card too in this deck. And I think that even though this astrology deck is the artwork is obviously very different. I like Saturn. It still goes well with it kind of ties in to the other decks. So when I'm choosing decks to work with, I do try to find ones that either the energy feels the same or the artwork's very similar. because it just helps me pull my readings in together. So the first deck is the Spacious Tarot. I've had this for, I don't want to say a while, but a good amount of time. And I just get such, I don't want to say clear readings because it's not the most direct deck as far as depictions go. But it is very, I feel like it knows me really well. Or I at least feel like it communicates what I need to hear really well, despite the sort of ambiguous artwork. So this is another indie deck. Again, I'll put the link below. I'm pretty sure it's still only, I'm pretty sure it's not, you can't buy it mass market. I bought it as an indie deck, so I'm gonna go with that. So the thing about this deck is there's no people in this deck. There's some animals in the court cards, but they're very sort of detached, I suppose. Actually, there's some animals in some of the other cards as well, but they're not like stealing all these, like, okay, this is the king of swords, and you do have a bird, but it's not like, the card doesn't feel like it's about the bird. You know, it gives, the whole idea is that the card, all of the cards leave space for you to enter. So if you like path working with your cards, or kind of just leaving things to the imagination, again, I guess detached is a really good word. This bear and the bird are good examples of that. But yeah, if you like to kind of leave the cards open to enter and apply your intuition over, as opposed to being more hit over the head with a scene that's going on, I think this deck is great for that. Oops. And I don't know, I love the artwork. It's very flat. The colors are very soft. There's not, I mean, there is a good amount of line work, but somehow it still feels gentle. And I guess actually not all of the cards have a lot of line work, but like the cups, for example, are all very clearly outlined, the lily pads. Yeah. I didn't expect to, I guess, bond with this deck as much as I did. I just got it for the artwork, and I got it at a time when I wasn't really, I wasn't as picky about the decks that I was buying, because this was maybe like my 4th or 5th deck, and I was still kind of figuring out what it was I liked and was looking for in a deck, specifically a tarot deck. And so this was one of the earlier ones I got, and yet it still would have made the cut if I imposed the same restrictions that I have now on it back then. Oh, this is, by the way, I think this is my favorite Justice card. I keep track of all my favorites. I'll probably do a video on that once I get through some of the decks I haven't really used yet. There's a couple of them left. I'm just gonna make like a favorites deck. I wouldn't use it like that, but it'd be interesting to just look at all my favorite cards from all the decks that I have. Now, let's see. So that's what we have so far. Last deck is this the Siren's Melody or Siren's Melody Tarot. I'm not realizing I'm not super good at remembering the exact names of decks because I always shorthand all of them. For me, this is called Sirens. So, this one I believe was originally a Kickstarter and is now, or was when I got it, available on Etsy. So I got mine on Etsy, and you can get a deck that either has keywords or no keywords, which is why there's so much border. Okay, when I first got this deck, I was kind of, it was an adjustment for me because when I was seeing the deck, it seemed so much bigger in the pictures. Like, I love the artwork. I really wish it took up more of the card as opposed to having such I don't want to say intrusive border because the border fits, like it works with the theme of, or the style of the deck, but the border gets a lot more attention than it should. However, I think it's because instead of having to reformat all of the each individual card, they just have the keywords literally filled in this bottom space here if you chose a deck with keywords, which obviously I didn't, so now I'm just stuck with a big border. So there are mermaids in the deck, but they're not in every card. Here's a good example. And it is oceany, I suppose. But again, not every card. Like, there's a card with, I want to say bees. I'm pretty sure there's a card with bees on it. And again, like, this doesn't give me ocean vibes, but it works. So if you kind of like, I don't know, if you like the ocean and you're kind of, if you're not bothered by mermaids, but you want something that feels a little, like a more unique ocean take. Like, this looks very oceany to me. But it's, I mean, that could be interpreted many ways. So if you don't want to be like slapped in the face with mermaids and waves and fish, then I would recommend this deck for that. Hopefully it's still available. When I put the link below, I guess I'll find out. Like this Seven of Swords. I mean, I guess there are sea serpents or what have you, but you know, this doesn't, it's, you know, it doesn't, there's not a mermaid in every card, basically. Some decks that are mermaid decks are over the top, I feel like, for those of us who don't really care for or are impartial to mer people. Here we go, I was right, there is a bee. Or, I'm pretty sure it's a bee and not a wasp. Something in that general family. Another thing about this deck, and the last thing I would complain about besides the borders, the cardstock, I even hesitate to call it that because it feels more like some sort of fabricy material. It's not. It's just, it's so, this is like worse than rose petal. It feels like it's very velvety. I don't think velvety is the right word people are using to describe this texture, because when you touch velvet and it doesn't feel like this, but it's just so rose petal. I don't even have a word for the level of rose petal finish this is, but it's like extreme. You're definitely not going to get any slipping. I mean, I can, not barely, I can still, you know, if you overhand shuffle, it still shuffles. It's a thick deck. I mean, it's pretty thick. I would just maybe not even complain. It's a part of the experience, I guess, but it takes some getting used to how the cards feel. Don't know if the Kickstarter was the same card stock, but there was no option to change the card stock when you're buying on Etsy. I don't believe. I don't recall that. I wouldn't have chosen anything that said rose petal finish on it. Full disclosure, I hate rose petal finish. I absolutely hate it. Because I don't know. It just feels funny. I'm not a fan. I have the Moonchild Tarot is also extremely rose petally, and full disclosure, not a big fan of that either. But this one is at least easier to handle because it's smaller. So, that's a nice one. Put that one there. So there you kind of have it. These are the decks I'm working with, and I'll probably do a few pick a card readings. I like doing them because I think they're a fun practice for me. It kind of, if nothing else, it helps me learn to read multiple decks together. So definitely into May, I'm going to be using these decks for that. If I do like gonna be honest, a card a day is not realistic for me, but if I do some sort of daily or semi-daily pull for like sort of journaling purposes, just to get the intuitive imagination flowing, it'd probably be with either the Wisdom or Begin Oracle. Although I suppose using the astrology deck would kind of be a good practice too. Kind of to just explore the different bodies and such more in depth instead of just what you read about. And I haven't really decided how else I'm going to use them in daily practice. I also have another deck. I'm not using it regularly, so I didn't include it in this. But it's the Modern Goddess Oracle by Ethany. And I didn't really make space for it in any of my sort of the deck curation that I do. Because I've planned like well into at least fall. So yeah, the Modern Goddess Oracle is not one that sort of made it into any of these groupings, but I will probably use that one just to play with. I kind of want to do like a I don't know, like I guess guess the goddess sort of thing, which I guess could also be a pick a card if I film it and just for you to kind of play along. What I'll do is I'll take one of those oracle decks that is very thematic, like a goddess deck or an astrology deck, and I'll just lay down 4 cards blindly, obviously, and I'll use whatever decks I'm using at the time to sort of give me information about what card it is. And it's not necessarily me trying to guess which one it is, but just me learning other ways that those cards communicate facts. So that kind of helps me too. Maybe I'll just record that. I mean, I guess if anything, it'd be nice for me to look back on if no one ever sees it. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much committed to this. I'm really trying hard not to change my mind on anything. So this is me committing to these 5 decks right now. And I will see you next time.